Welcome everybody to the Ottawa City Commission study session. Do we have any public comments?
None registered.
Great, thank you. All right, that'll move us on to items for presentation and discussion. The first one is the Kansas Independent College Finance Authority, the revenue anticipation notes for Ottawa University with our city manager.
This is your annual PICFA renewal. It's temporary note financing in the amount of, or revenue anticipation note financing for series 2023 for $6 million. And the PICFA is an association of 14 cities and independent colleges and universities around the state, with Ottawa being a member. And it ranges in community size from Heston, Sterling, Hillsborough, all the way up to the size of Salina and Wichita. It's authorizing a certificate of approval, authorizing the mayor to execute that certificate, attesting that due notice was given in accordance with section 147F of the IRS code, and that a public hearing was conducted on Friday, May 19th, with the notice of public hearing being posted on the issuer TICFA's website not less than 7 days before scheduled, which did occur on May 19th. And the city's under no obligation of any kind. Our full faith and credit is not at risk, and the financing merely provides short-term capital that's required and will be repaid later this summer or early autumn when the students return. And this is authorized under Article 12, Section 5 of the Kansas Constitution and KSA 12-2901 at SEC. So it would be staff's recommendation, if there are no questions, to authorize the mayor to execute the certificate of approval for the issuance of $6 million in series 2023 revenue anticipation notes. And I know we have representatives from Ottawa University, and I believe bond counsel is available as well, should you have any questions.
Commissioners, any questions for either our city manager or any of the other representatives?
Assume they need this today versus waiting till the 7th.
We could do it on the 7th, but it would be really tight with the final cost issuance. So today was why it was presented for consideration.
Mr. Mayor, with that, I'll make a motion to approve this certificate of approval.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Sorry. Those opposed, same sign. Motion approved. All right. Thank you. That'll move us on to item 2, moderate income housing and MIH application for Platinum Properties with Director Landis.
Thank you. We talked last Monday about the upcoming deadline for the moderate income housing grant application through Kansas Housing Resource. Sorry, I had my letters mixed up. And at that time, we brought to you 2 projects, one for an MIH ARPA, which is the larger scale project, requesting more money than the traditional program that they had started, and one for the traditional MIH project. So at this time, the MIH ARPA project has decided not to move forward. And so we are not going to present those items to you today. They're not in your packet. The only project then is our normal moderate income housing project. Our conversation with you last week was, this is a project that came to us in the last round, but didn't quite meet the criteria for moderate income housing requirements and the income limits of those that they were intending to use in the rental program for the property. But they have restructured the plan for that property. And so what you have in front of you is a resolution that would be supporting a project called Legacy Lofts by Platinum Properties. And it is on Walnut Street between 1st and 2nd Streets. It's a $2.2 million project with 11 residential units. There's 5 3-bedroom, 5 2-bedroom, and 1 penthouse piece to this, as well as 3 base level commercial units. And so when applying for this grant will support the housing part of the project. So when the final application goes in, we'll break that out and show what the support is for the residential part. But because it is a mixed use project, we are giving it to you as a whole. The resolution does talk mostly about it being the housing needs, supporting the housing needs of the city. So the application, when it does go to the state, will have a rather lengthy and compelling description as to why this is needed in our community, all of the things that you would normally want to use to support a grant application to the state. It's a very competitive process. It has become a process where our area has been awarded in the first round, or the first new round of money that was awarded in December of 2022. We received funding. Wellsville received funding in the first round this year, and this is our second round in 2023. So it is very competitive, and we do know that they will be looking at smaller communities and smaller counties, but it is worth submitting an application because you don't know what other cities and counties are going to submit, and you want to make sure that that we're being as competitive as we can to trying to get as much of those grant dollars as we can to support our housing initiatives here. So the resolution that's in front of you is a resolution of support for the project itself. This project does not include an RHID component. It might at some point include some other type of funding component, but it would not be anything that would require you to approve anything for at this point that would have to accompany the application. Because of the tight turnaround and because of the holiday next Monday, we don't have another opportunity to get this in front of you before the deadline, which is June 2nd. So if you want to consider this project or be in support of this project, you could either consider the resolution for approval today or potentially schedule a special meeting in order to schedule approval of that resolution. We're happy to either answer questions now. We're happy to provide more information if you want to schedule something else. And just looking around to see if anyone was here from the project. No. So what can I do to any questions you might have?
I noticed there is less information presented to us than the last time we saw an NIH application. I think we saw maybe even some schematics. Until I just heard from you, I didn't even know how many apartments. I mean, what the breakdown of apartments look like. So is there a reason that we just didn't get more information about what the project looks like, minus the resolution, or is there a way to do that? Or
There is.
I'm not against it. I'm just
no.
you just have very limited information.
It's a great question, and you know what I thought of that this afternoon, that you hadn't actually seen it. I can send that out to you if it's something that you want to consider at another meeting. If you want to do something different, I can certainly get that all to you. I apologize. You certainly should see that information.
I'm hesitant to just blindly just say like, yeah, hey, go ahead, go forward with this resolution, but we've not ever seen it. And we don't, I mean, when I hear penthouse, I have a hard time believing it's MIH, but maybe it's just me.
Sure. I do have the rental rate for that. And it does fit within the moderate income housing limits. But again, you would have known that because you didn't have the information. So what would you like to, what can I do to help with that?
I may be standalone on wanting just to know that information. I just always think the most information we can have to have an informed vote is the best way to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the last time we broke down basically by bed, how much money they were asking for, as it was a competitive project. And I know this is the only one this time. So we're not picking from a list, so it's a little easier on that. But as well, seeing some of that information on what the rents are going to be, kind of, their full ask and the plans and that kind of stuff as well, I think would help. I'm obviously still in favor of our support.
Yeah, because I'm looking at it a little bit differently in that there's no risk on the city side on this, there's no liability, we're just kind of being that, yes, we endorse this project. I see what you're saying, Sarah, though, are we willing to endorse something that we haven't really seen the information on, so I mean, I know you just adore a penthouse view, don't you?
Well,
Somewhere,
if our middle incomes, as citizens can afford it, great for them. That's great. Just more information.
they call it a penthouse, but I'm guessing it's not like a New York penthouse, I'm guessing it's gonna be an Ottawa penthouse.
I'm guessing an Ottawa
Okay, that's
penthouse. That would be the only type that would fit within the income limits that are eligible. So
Commissioners, what would you like to do moving forward on this item with Director Landis? Do you want to hold off on the resolution and have a special call meeting so we can gather more information? Or what would you like to do?
I know I'm available for a call meeting if we later this week need to do a special call just to get this through before the deadline with the Memorial Day holiday on Monday. Is the second is the deadline?
yes,
So you probably want to get it out of here by what day? 30th
sure.
Sure.
or sooner.
Today.
Or the day before, it does have to be submitted by June 2nd. But other than that, there's no other. There's no reason to do it early. It's not like it's going to be viewed earlier or sit on a priority list. I might, if you would like to talk about it in more detail yet today, I do have the packet of information. I can make copies. We could move it to the end of the agenda and you could work through it and I can kind of walk you through the information. I don't have the developer here. So they wouldn't be here to answer questions, but I can do as much as I can. That might be another option for you, but it's up to you how you'd like to move on it.
And I'm available for a virtual meeting or even possibly an in-person meeting. Just not on Friday.
Commissioners, just for transparency purposes, because of my relationship with the applicant, I will not voice my opinion on this, so I will do whatever the commission recommends.
I think for our due diligence, I think we should see all the information, at least look at it. That's been our process before. I think process is important. And I think we just keep the same process for every application. I think it's just smoother, it's clearer, it's transparent. And I have no problem yet doing a virtual meeting if we need to later this week, early next week, or even at the end of this meeting, like you said. If we don't get all of our questions answered, once we have all the information, doing something after that is fine with me.
I'd be available for the most part. I may have to do it via Zoom, but I think I would prefer to, if you sent out the information, I do better reading it myself, just absorbing it rather than hearing it. So I would say maybe if anybody was available later this week to discuss this further and move it along.
Yeah.
We can have the information when we leave here today and go home with it. I don't know, Wednesday mornings have typically always been good for us with regard to our past meetings, or at least once a month. Anybody object to the same time on this Wednesday morning? What's your schedule look like?
I'll be able to virtually be in, I'll be in the office. Yeah, if
15 minutes or
Yeah.
fine.
less than, yeah.
I have an 8:30 meeting on Wednesday, but I can do it right after that 8:30 meeting. So
Try that.
10 or even a lunchtime meeting.
It's 10 o'clock fine with all of us on Wednesday.
Yep.
Let's do that.
Okay,
And if you could send that out to us this afternoon,
absolutely.
that way we can look at it, have a few days.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
All right, that moves us on to item 3, which is a continued discussion on the allowance of chickens within municipal corporate limits. City manager?
And I'll turn this over to the body and Jenna with community development, but as I outlined in the agenda report, the recommendations to discuss and direct staff to the governing body's desired course of action. This was originally discussed on January 23rd, 2023 at a study session where public comments were received to request the consideration for the allowance of chickens, specifically within, what we would call, traditional residential lots. They're currently allowed now. However, the lot size and acreage requirement is significantly more than our standard lot. The commission discussed the matter again at a follow-up on February 6th, 2023. And at that time, the city commission received 33 petitions, which are attached with this report as Exhibit 3B. So we're presenting it again as staff was directed to come up with some options and present to the governing body for future consideration. And I'll turn it over to Jenna now for some additional comments before discussing further.
Good afternoon. So we've done quite a bit of research. I introduced some of that to you when we met on February 6th. Looking at several different cities, not more than several, about 15 different cities, ranging in size from 1,500 to 150,000. They allow chickens. We're pretty much the only one. We do actually allow, so that's not an accurate statement. It's just with conditions that, like Brian said, cannot really happen here within the city limits. But most of these cities allow chickens from anywhere from 3 to 20. I think there's only one that allows roosters. And so what we're looking at, looked at a bunch of different options. One was a very detailed ordinance change that had a lot of teeth to it. And after discussing it, I think the easier way to go would be to just do a simple change and to allow them. What I saw throughout all the different cities was there were lot size recommendations, setback lines to, because aside from the 33 petitions that we've had, there's been a lot of conversation about these in and around our office. A lot were for this, some were against. A lot of it was not in my backyard sort of thing. So the setbacks actually are intended to try and keep them away from the neighbors, the adjoining property owners, the occupied homes. So the setbacks would be 10 feet from the back lot and 100 feet away from any other occupied home. There'd also be a fence requirement, not just for the chicken coop and run, but also for the backyard itself, so that they would be contained. So we don't have free range chickens. As with any of the animals that we have in the city, we don't want them running around. And so part of that, we're looking at doing a permit for chickens, so that one, we can educate the public on what it's going to take to keep them, because not everyone has experience with doing this. There are standard sizes for coops, for healthy creatures, and also to be able to keep diseases and things like that, because they can make you sick, and just to be able to educate people on what is needed. The enforcement of these things, it would be reactive. If there were complaints, we would then go and check and see if things were how they were supposed to be done in the first place. But also the people who would be part of the permitting process would be to check and see if there were any outstanding code violations, or possibly any other animal control type situations, along with the education piece. So what else I have here? Can't read. And also be able to track how many permitted coops we had here in the city. So what we're recommending is maximum of 4 hens, no roosters. Again, at the fenced coop, fenced yard. And so there would be an amendment to the provision of exotic animals as part of the portion of the code as well. All rental properties would need to have the landlord's approval. And there would be permits, the permit fee and fines as well. And like I said, a proactive inspection.
We know what a typical permit fee would be for some of these.
What I'm seeing was anywhere between $10 and $25. Actually, there were some that were 100.
Okay, but that's just one time fee, right?
So that could be a one-time fee. It could be annual. It could be every 2 years. I would recommend every 2 years was the thing that I saw most on.
And on the setbacks, you said 10 feet from the back property line, same on the sides.
The idea would be, so it has to be 100 feet away from any other structure. I hadn't really looked into the side
I
setbacks.
didn't know if 100 feet from the whole.
10 feet from any lot line.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
And
There we
100
go.
feet
Thank
from
you.
a habitable structure.
And 10 feet, so if you live in a house, it's gotta be 100 feet behind your house then, right?
Correct.
That might limit some.
So my thinking on that after this was written was that it would limit the people being able to have them in their backyard. So my thought was that it would be from any other occupied structure.
Neighbors.
From the neighbors.
And so it would be a different setback for the property from the owner's house
Versus.
than
neighbors.
the neighbors, because just to keep them out of other people's backyard, because not everybody wants to have chickens in their backyard.
And that's kind of how I read it as well, was that it would be 100 feet from someone else's.
Neighbors. Yeah. so that makes-
I think it's gonna make it absolutely difficult at being 100
100
feet.
feet, yeah.
The normal depth of a lot is 150.
Right.
So, I mean, if you put a house on a lot next to somebody with chickens, I mean, they're gonna be within 100 feet.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's pretty restrictive at 100 feet, quite honestly.
There might be a difference there.
And
Could be.
do we know how many lots within the city fit the 7,500 square foot, 50 by 150? Because I know that's the average lot size, but is that 80% of the city lots? Do we have kind of a rough idea on what?
I can get that information for you. I don't have our GIS
Yeah.
at work like I'm used to
Mhm.
GIS working, but I can talk to somebody at the county who might
See.
be able to get those numbers for us.
Because I had the same thing with the 100 feet, that kind of just looking at GIS around the city everywhere.
Yeah, so if we do our setbacks at 20 and 20,
Mm.
then it is limiting it unless it. I mean, it would be very close with a 150-foot lot to be
Yeah.
able to get, it would be at the,
Yeah, especially if it's the full
Very back.
radius. I mean,
Right.
yeah, your
with the 10-foot
neighbors.
setback, but you're right, yeah, the math
Mm.
doesn't always work, but.
And the 4 chickens, is that adequate? Do the people think? I've not heard from many. I heard once someone say 8 chickens they preferred, but they're happy to have any. I don't know if 6 might be a good compromise, or is 4 enough to make it worth their while?
Sorry to pour.
Not 20. but
I had the same concern, sorry, go ahead. I had the same concern. I liked all the suggestions staff had. The only 2 concerns I had were the setback from the occupied structure. I thought that was too restrictive and the maximum number of hens. I mean, if you look at all the other ones, the 15 or so on here, there's only 2 of them that are less than 6, and I had written down 6.
Yeah,
So I was thinking 50 foot from an occupied structure and 6 hens.
6 inches.
That's just my suggestion.
There's one thing I didn't mention, Overland Park is doing a pilot program. Where they're, instead of turning it into, changing their ordinance. They're doing a pilot program for 2 years. It expires in December of this year. Just to experiment with it and see how it works before they put it into awkward, written in stone. So that is a thought as well. I have reached out to them and have not heard back, but I can continue to try and get a hold of them if that is something that you're interested in. I'm curious to see how it's going.
I think my only concern with that would be then after 2 years,
What do we do? with
we're
the
back in
chickens?
the same place. And then if we decide, or a new commission decides that we're not going to do chickens, then they have however many people on the pilot program with chickens,
Right.
and coops and fences and.
And what I read is that there goes to a conditional use permit after would be, is how they seem to be dealing with that.
And there are some people that do have chickens now. Are they grandfathered in? They've had chickens for 40 years in their backyards or their garages behind their house. And so I want to make sure they're grandfathered in, no concern that they can continue on the way they're doing it. Obviously, they're doing it right because I don't think any neighbors have ever complained. I know of one in particular that could be an issue with a small yard. So I think I'd want to have those people that have had it in place for the last, I don't know how many years, if you want to go back 10 or 15 years. They should be grandfathered in, it's okay.
I'm actually interested in how Overland Park is doing that, and I don't think it's a bad idea that if the commission should choose to, for us to give it kind of a trial period. I have lots of questions about this, and I feel like I've talked to several different community members from different communities. I am interested in how it was decided that codes would enforce this when other animals are enforced by our police department. So where does that stand? And then we have currently our animal control officer is full-time, part-time? And how many do we have?
We have one full-time, but he does have some other ancillary duties in addition to animal control function.
And so is it fair to say that we don't have an animal control officer on Saturdays and Sundays, or at least a couple days a week?
That is correct. Most evenings and most, not on weekends, but we do flex that schedule around all times of year, especially as we go into summer as well. But yes, there's only 40 hours in a given week that we have full-time animal control coverage.
And they have other duties, as you were saying, so it's not just primary animal control.
Correct.
And then, if our police department were to cover that and to our animal control officer were to cover that, do you have capacity to take chickens in?
Without knowing what some of the other municipalities or cities have and received, I don't know that I can answer that yet.
My question, and it's really random, and I was thinking about it, but it kind of piggybacks off of that in a way. Prairie paws.
Oh, that's
You
my next question,
receive
is literally, is prairie paws.
Okay, so if, because when you purchase chickens, there's no guarantee that you did not get a rooster in that batch. Like my parents have chickens and someone's going to get a rooster. And if they don't like chicken and noodles, then they may want to.
They do.
Yeah, I mean, not want to do. So it's not uncommon, or it's been done.
It already happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Handle those. Okay, very good.
Is there, I mean, I just. We have a part-time codes officer, correct? I mean, so do we anticipate that that person would then take on those duties of enforcing codes, or how does that look, or maybe?
We do already get complaints about chickens in the city. And it has fallen to him to follow up on. We've put some of those on pause because we knew this was in process. But that is one of the concerns, is the capacity to enforce and to manage permits. I did discuss with the staff upstairs on their workload and how many, what that would look like. And I imagine that it would be a lot at first and then it would taper off. But I think it's a good opportunity to educate people at the same time. So I wouldn't advise not doing a permit for that very reason, but the enforcement part could be the tricky bit.
And our permitting currently on, like, dogs and stuff comes from prairie paws. So does it seem, if we're saying like, hey, you can have your dog and you can permit it, you need to go to prairie paws. And then if you have chickens too, you also need to go to code enforcement. I mean, are we asking a bunch of different? I mean, is there a way to streamline that, or?
We need a prairie paws clause.
Well, I suppose.
One of the things that I was thinking about for the permitting process was that for them to provide a site plan like they would for a shed or a garage or fence, so that we can just have that discussion about where it can be on their property and what the provisions need to be in order to keep them. So it is just to get them to think about it a little bit more.
And I think that's fair, considering, we're going to have requirements for, the structure for the chickens. So I think having them come, you guys would be the best option for that.
And we will be reviewing. It's something that was kind of listed as important but not urgent, the permitting process across the board on everything from how we register our dog licenses to making the Office of Community Development kind of a one-stop shop.
What does landlord approval look like? We haven't.
They would need to submit a letter from their landlord with contact information.
And in the permitting process initially would be construction, like you said, with the site plan. Then the follow-up, the second to last bullet point, is that permit like an annual permit for the chickens? Do you have to each year, or is that still defined? So I'm sure like one of these is community development for a structure. Then the others is that permit and fine classification, is that more animal related than structure related?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think that would fall under what the land use and also in some communities under the environmental code.
Commissioners, any other questions or thoughts?
Staff have enough guidance on that to.
Well, what would you like us to come back with?
I think as commissioners, I think we need to, because this is the first time we've actually had an open discussion about it. We received the letters from, and maybe maybe I could be misguided, and maybe I don't exactly remember how it went. But I remember us receiving the petitions from individuals. I don't believe we've ever had an open conversation about it in detail. And so I'm in no hurry to make it work really quickly. Much like I think when you ask questions, when you take time to actually dig in and do those things, I think that's the right way to proceed when you make changes. So, you know, I don't know that I thank you, Jenna, for doing all of that. I appreciate that. I just think we need to now have the conversation with the greater community.
I know for me, I've been hearing from people a lot, you know, whether it be on Facebook or in person, and I would have to say, I would even say 95% in favor of would be low. I mean, it's probably even more than that. I think I have maybe heard from one person that is not in favor. And while I don't particularly want chickens or my neighbor to have chickens, it's not my job to choose what I want. It's my job to choose what everybody else wants. So what my preference in saying that would be, I know I've heard from the public a lot about this. But I think in our normal fashion, maybe talk about it again another Monday, but I do think we had a few questions that we kind of gave you, or, you know, just regarding what the permitting process would look like, and if we change it to 50 feet for the setback, and potentially the number of hens to be 6 rather than 4, and things like that. I would be fine seeing that again.
And I think those are some questions we could answer right now to give staff direction. How do we feel about what their suggestions already are? So that Jenna could not, you know, mark it off her list. Okay, we're the commission's fine with that. Or as Commissioner Graves just said, you know, some of the suggestions that I repeated, some of the suggestions that I made. I guess if we could give staff, you know, direction on that, at least I know they could go back and get some of that other information answered for us, or at least bring us the information that we could review at that point.
I think something I would like to see kind of with the lot size is an option for conditional use for people who have smaller lots. Typically smaller lots are a lower income, where I can see chickens being a utility at that point. And I don't want to set the lot size so large that people who have smaller homes can't. At least give them an option to do conditional use, give them a, you know, modality to try to get there, but, you know, so they're just not excluded from the permit process.
I guess I like to look at the date when our present ordinance was passed. If we look in that, and I guess when I say by grandfathered in, people prior to that, if this was 1980 or 1990, whatever it was, then people prior to that had chickens, we should be able to take one. I don't think I want to restrict them on our new policies.
So outside of Commissioner Clayton, outside of the lot size, is there any of those other suggestions that staff has that you might have some suggestions of changing?
Yeah, setback to 50 feet, I think makes sense. And that would be one that, you know, maybe potentially conditional use as well. And then 6, I think makes sense on the number of hens.
I would agree with that. I know with 4, you're not going to get any eggs at some point. So in the winter and things, 6 might face it a little bit.
Commissioner Taylor? Any opinion on any of those?
I'm more
Suggestions?
concerned about the enforcement.
Okay.
That's really what I'm concerned about. I don't think taking the Overland Park method or the method of trying it for a couple of years is a bad idea. I think that trial is the way we should go.
I like that idea. Yeah, I certainly like to see what they're doing.
Yeah,
And-
we could hear more about
Yep.
that.
Mayor Pro Tem Skidmore, did you have any other suggestions on the,
I think I'm good with that.
okay. So we just got, if you could get us a little bit of information on the Overland Park pilot program that they have. And then some of the enforcement issues that Commissioner Kaler had. We would certainly like that information.
I will say a lot dozen eggs this weekend for $1.25, so
Yeah.
they're coming down, but oh well. It's their loss.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that moves us on to our 2024 budget overview with our community partners, Director Landis. Hello.
Thank you. Hi, I think that I want to give you a brief overview of how the community partner requests fit into our special revenue funds. So just real briefly run through the first two slides of this PowerPoint, if that's okay. No. So our special revenue funds are funds that have a dedicated revenue source and a specific expenditure. And so in this case, for the community service fund, it does have a revenue source that comes from our water, sewer, electric, and general funds. And so we just split that up evenly amongst all four funds to be able to fund the requests that come in. All of our other special revenue funds, there's a laundry list of funds, and we'll go through all of those after you hear from our community partners. And actually, the way that we have this set up is you were provided their applications and everything that they were requesting. It includes some of their history, and there's a top sheet for each one of them that kind of shows the last several years worth of funding and that's in total what's being asked. This is a summary, and in total, just for a community partner request, we are right. I have it. It's on your front page. $3,425 over last year. That includes an increase from FCDC and a small increase from ELC. Otherwise, everybody else's requests were standard from last year. So really, we can move in two different ways. We can ask them to say a few words and go through the request with you, or you can ask questions of them. We have most of our people here that represent each one of our partnerships here. So however you would like to proceed on this, do you think is the best use of their time and yours?
Commissioners, would you like to go through each of these individually, or do you just want me to go through each of the commissioners individually and see if there's questions that you have for each one of the partners? How would you like to move forward?
Commissioner, maybe I've got some things, certain things to ask about here, but just with the rest of the group.
You want to go that route?
I don't know if you need, I personally, I don't know that I need to hear from every single
Yeah.
applicant here, every
So-
community partner, so. And I appreciate all that they do, and I appreciate them being here today, but I just don't know that I need to hear.
So we'll go commissioner to commissioner. If you have any questions for any of the community partners, we'll just ask them, and if they feel like they need to come up and speak, then that'll be fine. So
And
please.
Commissioners, Paul Bean is not available today for FCDC, so I apologize for that, but we can ask him to come in at another one of our sessions if you can ask questions. And there, nothing we do today is set in stone. It's all just informational anyway, so. Okay.
Commissioner Graves, do you have any questions?
That was actually going to be my only question, mostly because that was the only increase, or somewhat substantial increase. The rest remained pretty flat and fair, I believe, so, I don't have any other questions than that.
Mr. Taylor?
I wonder if Elizabeth Layton, and although it's a small increase, it's just, tell me about your justification of your increase, and I know you're changing models and how.
The increase for ELC is a percent increase, and it's mostly related to the clinical supervision of our co-responder. As you know, the staffing increases are happening left and right, and that 3% is meant to offset some of that.
And so, the increase that you received last year was beyond the revision. And so, I'm trying to kind of, understand in my head.
Well, the increase from last year was because you brought that coalition. Work with law enforcement, and so there had to be some clinical supervision added to do that.
Commissioner Clayton?
I don't think I really have anything in terms of questions on most of these. I know I personally would like to specifically on some of these, try to set up some time to actually visit some of these places, ELC, for example, and actually learn more about what you guys kind of do. Obviously some of these are smaller amounts, but being a good steward of our citizens' money, I'd love to sometimes schedule times for a lot of these organizations to just come out and see kind of where the money's going, what you guys are doing for the community as well, and truly be a community partner, I guess, and learn more about what's happening at those. But that's all that I really have.
Mayor Pro Tem Skidmore.
And just with the LC too, just I know you serve other municipalities and also Miami County. Do the other municipalities or other counties help support in any way financially?
Yes. They do.
They contribute as well.
Well, wait a second. Are you saying municipality?
Well, like Viola, Lewisburg,
Municipalities, no.
okay,
It's mostly,
county funding, okay. And that'd be something just to look at for the future. If there's people from, looks like the service area, it was pretty much, I saw some, looks like more from Miami and Franklin back and forth, it kind of went. But that to make something suggested, maybe the communities, if there's people from Lewisburg and Paola needing services, maybe they can help their citizens pay for a little bit of it as well. I was just surprised on page 118, about a third of your clients are between 6 and 18 years old. That kind of struck me that these people in the formative years are needing some help. I'm glad you're there for it. It just kind of caught me back, wow, this is a pretty important program here to be able to help get people, teenagers, whatever it might be, steered in the right direction. Very important. So I just want to say thanks for what you do on that. And I know you have a lot of cash on position too. And I don't know if you have anything set up with your bank accounts as far as generating the most you can from your idle funds. We at City Hall here, we started a sweep account. Only help us get going. Kansas State Bank helped us get that going. Where idle money sitting earning 3.25% interest, sweeps over to your checking account to write checks. I don't know where you bank, but you might talk to your banker about a sweep account to be able to maximize your return on your idle funds.
we just made that move a couple months ago, so it's kind of funny to bring that up.
Very good. Glad to hear that. That's what, just as, but I'm glad you're doing that. So. And that was really no question I had, but yeah, I would say it's a very modest increase. I have no trouble with that at all. I wish I could get you more money, actually.
You know, some of that.
Thanks, Mike.
Said it. Director Landis, did the commission make a suggestion last year to increase the ELCs?
I think so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought we made a suggestion to increase some of that, so that was some of that significant increase from year to year. So, okay. The only question I have is for Rylan, are the fireworks gonna be here on time this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the important thing. Any other questions for any of the community partners? Great, all right. That'll move us on to item 5, which is our 2024 budget overview for the special revenue funds.
All right. So, and thank you to all of our community partners for being here to be able to answer questions. The way that we organize our special revenues is that we did choose 5 of the more major ones that have a lot more activity in them, and also have some capital improvements that we had just discussed with you at our last presentation on the budget. And first of all, I want to apologize if the very front page of your presentation says 2023. That's this year. We're working on 2024, so I apologize for the error. But everything that we provided in here, we tried to give you an overview of a more broad overview of the fund and where those fund balances might be headed to. We do have a revenue and expense line by line forecast that we work through on every one of these funds. It's a 5-year forecast. Most all of them we have out, even some of them further than 5 years, just trying to see what that impact is, especially if they have debt, ongoing debt, or any new large projects that might incur some debt in the future, or need some major fund balance to be able to cover those. So to start off, we're going to talk about special streets. And this one, our major revenue source here is fuel tax and the federal funds exchange revenue source. Mostly these projects are large, non-routine maintenance projects. So we do have our annual street maintenance program. While called maintenance, it is typically those large projects that would not fit into your general fund operating budget. And so that's what we try to place in here. Also, we did just recently talk about the 2 projects, one of them being Cedar Street and one of them being our annual maintenance project that would come out of this fund between 24 and 28 as part of your CIP. So really the focus here would be the blue line is your expenditures at the top. The gray line is your year-ending cash balance. And so the way that we have these budgeted out, before we brought you the CIP, we went through these funds to make sure there was going to be adequate funding to be able to do those projects, at least based on what our expected costs are for those. So you can see that this does leave those 2 projects as they were brought to you does leave some adequate funding in this account. Now, as we move forward and over time, I think we all know and understand that those street projects or just budgeting $250,000 every year does not get you much of a street project annually, and that over time we'd love to be able to increase that. But our limited revenue stream coming in, it is very stable. It is that we only get what we get, and it is pretty much the same amount year over year. So we will look for some creative ways to get some of those other big street projects done that we need to over time as we put together a more broad look at those streets. Do you have questions about the special streets fund at all?
On the expenditures line, what is that tracking? If we have 250 budgeted for 2024, what is that 500? On the graph, the expenditure line is at 500.
Oh,
Is it-
sure.
Yeah, I think it might have been.
For 2024.
And yeah, looking at, 2023, they're all
Yes.
over $400,000.
So we have existing debt that gets paid for from this fund to the tune of 137,000 roughly every year. So it's that plus your annual budget plus whatever we do also, like if we're engineering our street projects or upcoming street projects, we pay for that from here as well. So that would be another expense that's in there. So it's not just the 250. And then as you look down, eventually that other project is that Cedar Street. I think it's out to, is it 27 or 28 projects? And we had talked about debt financing that project. Right now, that would be the plan, not knowing where we'll land on that in a couple of years, but you'll see that then added to our transfers and you'll start to see that fund balance come down slightly annually to cover that debt payment as well.
So I think that service is on a separate category here, not on this one right here.
So no, it is. So this is just your total expenditures and your total fund balance.
But the 250 is not reflecting all of the expenses on our streets and.
No, these are just your capital projects down here. I'm sorry, maybe I didn't, that's not very clear. So the very bottom is only your capital projects. And I'm sorry, that bottom one isn't labeled and it was supposed to be where it says long-term debt. That one is long-term debt, but funded by the Special Streets Fund. It is your Cedar Street project that we talked to you about, the one that's not stormwater related. So it doesn't start until later in 2028. So we would finance that then. So this is just a graph to show your total expenditures and your ending fund balance year over year. And really that's what we're looking at when we're budgeting out special revenue funds. Our planned projects or the planned expenditures, do they fit? So you're not budgeting property tax dollars. A lot of them don't get any sales tax revenue. And so They only have those special revenue sources that are coming in. So when we're planning projects, we're looking to make sure that you have a positive fund balance. Not just for that year, but also for the future years, when you know those other projects are going to be coming to you.
Backwards on that. I see the special streets is at the bottom of the picture, although it's talking
Yeah.
about everything above that.
Yes, I think it's confusing too. I thought it was confusing too. I thought it was in the wrong location.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, I see that.
Do you know how much, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
How much is left in that existing debt? 137,000 a year?
I think I do. No, I don't have that page. I don't have that information. I'm sorry. I'll bring that back to you. Also, I wanted to talk about in that total expenditures line is included the funds that would be transferred to that special sidewalk fund. And where we talked about the sidewalk programs and that it needs funding, right? So it doesn't have any revenue source, a transfer from this fund to that program. We budgeted at 50,000 per year, although we know that over time we'll need to increase that if we're going to do $100,000 worth of projects every year. But until we really get into that long-term plan, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like.
Until we have a whole sidewalk, you're saying, right?
Mhm.
Is that
Yes.
both sidewalk programs?
Yeah.
We have 60 for one, 40 for the other, right?
We did, so we don't always use the resident program as much as what we budget, so we just decided that we would roll those kind of together, make sure that we know we're holding out some monies for that resident program and trying to budget and plan for the city replacement program altogether in that fund, because it's in a special revenue fund. Whatever you don't spend, it automatically rolls up to the beginning of next year. So if you're planning this right, these are a lot easier to plan than anything that's happening in the general fund, right? So in those years, you don't know exactly what those revenues are going to be. And these funds, you pretty much know exactly what's going to be available.
So we do have some revenue though in the sidewalk fund if they were to utilize the program in which the neighbor or the resident is helping to pay for a portion of their sidewalk to be redone.
We don't, it's not revenue coming in. We only contribute the portion to that program. The only expense you see is our contribution to their improvement. We don't pay for the whole thing and then they reimburse us. We contribute to their project, but
And
we
they
don't
cover
they cover the remaining. Yes.
between the contract. and
Yes.
funds. Okay.
Yes.
And I had asked Melanie to combine the two so we could reflect in the budget what our sidewalk dedication was in total.
So I apologize if these screens are confusing. What we were attempting to do is give you a screenshot look at each of the major funds. We had, like I said, 5 of them. So this one is special streets, and to be able to outline for you what the major revenue source is, what the major expenditures are. And we've talked in the past that we wanted to see, kind of where these funds are going to land. And we had talked about it internally, and we wanted to give you a history of the fund, as well as not just the 24 budget, but another year, to be able to kind of show you that it's not just ending at that current year, but that fund balance continues on beyond that.
I think the visual is just confusing to me, and it's just, the visual of it's just confusing because it looks like here, it just looks like special parks should be underneath it.
That's another screen. This is all special streets. So this is your fund balance and expenditures, and this is your CIP for special streets. This is the special street slide. So I apologize. Yes, the title's not at the top.
Yeah, so I'm like,
That's
just, okay.
yes, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's not at the top.
And do we know what revenues have been in these past years?
Yeah, so on average, we receive about $340,000 from fuel tax. We budgeted 335 on the conservative side for 2024. And our federal funds exchange dollars, they do fluctuate slightly, but between 155 and 160,000. So we did budget the 150,000. We know that there was a year in there where they distributed monies that had not been spent in their fund. So we know that it will probably come back down and level out a little bit, but we don't know exactly where it's going to land. So without knowing exactly where we'll be this year, it was difficult to know where we would be next year. I'm sorry. We do know where we're going to land this year, our actual amount, because we signed that agreement with them. But we budgeted conservatively for next year.
Jump up here. There's something to really take to heart about the federal funds exchange. Those are monies that the state receives from the federal government. The state shares those with cities. They are not obligated to do so. So at any time, the state could say, nope, we're not sharing this year. So that's something to be aware of. We did get lucky here a couple of years ago. They came out with a one-time increase, and I think we ended up with $220-some thousand on the federal funds exchange, but that was a one-time increase. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware that even though we budget for it, we could end up not getting that. So
And about every 3 or 4 years, we have to reach out to our elected representatives in Topeka to explain the reliance that we have on that, not just Ottawa, but municipalities, cities across Kansas. Because it would be significant.
Well, and I think the other piece of that is we would have the opportunity to go to the federal government and ask for the money. And we would be competing with everyone else asking for the same money. And so instead of doing the split with the state, we would be in a much more competitive environment and likely wouldn't receive those funds at all.
Roughly at what point does a repair go from being just in your general fund? For each year to this kind of fund? Is it a dollar amount or scope?
yes,
That's
to be honest with you, it can go both ways. It depends on how big the repair is and what type of a repair it is, how big it is, and what the cost of it is. Because a repair may be large in scope, but may not be large in cost. So we kind of take those things, take all of that into consideration when we're deciding where to pay for it out of, whether to pay for it out of the general fund or out of special highway. But by and large, pothole repairs, for the most part, are paid for out of the general fund. Just about everything else is paid for out of special.
You have other questions on special streets?
No, I think 250 is good. I think we should really think about increasing this. I just think if this is the major contributor to roads and sidewalks, but roads as well, $250 does not go very far, or $250,000. $250 really doesn't go very far. But especially with you would be the one that I would defer to with holding a cash balance in there. Since this is a special fund, how much we should keep available in there. Obviously to cover debt service and any of that, but what options we might have to look to increase this.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with you. So our fund balance policy says that unless we've determined something else, we would normally use 20% as a target. Sometimes when you have debt service coming out of a fund like we do in here, sometimes you would want to do 20% of your expenditures plus 100% of 1 year's worth of debt service. So you could make sure that you were always protected to be able to pay that debt and not have to be in reliance on other funds like your general fund. So right now that balance is fine. Once we get down the road several years and we start entertaining the Cedar Street project, that fund balance will start to fall. And so so we need to have a more informed conversation about that. Right now, it lives in the CIP, but it is still several years out. As we start really truly planning for that and getting some design and engineered costs come back to us, we'll really want to have another conversation.
And it's important to note too, that if you go to City A's special street fund, that may or may not have debt service, and City B's may be the exact opposite of the way. So it's, if you're looking at one city, even if it's a comparable city in population, there may be a significant difference as to why those fund balances would be different, because one may be safeguarding debt, cash flow, and the other, harnessing it entirely for operations.
They're great questions. I think you should understand how the funds work, especially these funds, they're important. Any other questions on special streets? No, okay. On special parks, this is another one of our major special revenue funds. Now, this one is right now the fund that it's just like the streets operationally, in that your operating money is in your general funds, but your special project type items, park replacement, playground replacement, the addition to any parks, the addition of sidewalks or trails to the park, any of those shelters, benches, shade coverings, those types of things are traditionally some of the things that come out of your special parks budget. The only one large item that we have currently in the city, in this budget, is the city park playground improvements. And that's because when you look at your fund balance, which is the gray on the screen, that because it does only have one dedicated revenue source, which is your liquor tax, it is a fairly steady stream of, that's the only revenue source you have in there. We're going to have to be very strategic about the way that we fund all of those other park projects. And we would be heavily reliant upon grant funding for a lot of those items. And our and
donations.
and donations. And we have our staff is really good about going out and applying for grants that are out there and available for playgrounds, mulch. There's a variety of types of grants that are out there that we can use to help fund some of those things. But for right now, in the special parks budget, we're showing you that the expenditures kind of drop, they stay fairly level because we only are really accounting for one large project in here right now, but we do have a variety of park projects that do need to be funded eventually. And that revenue source, just go back to answering some of the same questions that we're asking. So it's about $35,000 a year is all you have coming in for revenue. There's one other revenue source that we do dedicate to this fund right now, and that is the water
Warranty.
the warranty. Thank
Yes.
you.
It is.
The warranty program. And so by partnering with them on that warranty program, that was dedicated to special parks. So that's just about $2,000 or $12,600 annually that comes into here. And then also some of those sales of, say, the lakeside properties, those things have come into here. And then, yes, that happened in 2022. And then also your park fees. So your park fees, we charge $300 per lot. We're dedicated park grounds. When they go to build on that lot, that's part of the fees that are paid for a building permit. And so $300 a piece comes into this fund. And we were in the past, those park fees would come in by quadrants in the city. And I don't know that that's always been used to be allocated to parks projects. And because it has such a, parks projects tend to be a lot more expensive than the dollars available. And we're kind of the opinion that all of the dollars go to improving the parks across the city at this point. And we could have a bigger conversation about that down the road if we want to, but that's pretty much how we have this laid out for you. Couple of questions you might have. The splash pad. at City Park is not included in here directly. We do have other funding sources that we were considering, either through donations, potentially some ARPA funding, or could be a variety of things. And then also the aquatic center design or eventual aquatic center construction, we would be looking at some sort of financing for that project. And I know we've had a bigger discussion about that recently. So we should just note that those things are not included in this current budget and or our projections at this point, because it really doesn't support that large of a project with the available revenue that's in here. Tons of questions do you have about special parks?
I don't think we have any more.
None? Okay, all right. The next one is the airport fund. And I want to talk a little bit about this graph at the top. So the airport fund has two sources of, two sources of revenue, one being transfers from your general fund, and the other being the portion of the revenue that comes back to us from our FBO contract. And I can kind of share with you what those are, but we cannot consider that we get all of the rental income because we don't get full fuel tax revenue. That's all part of the agreement that we're under currently with the FBO. And as well as the payment, so they keep part of the revenue as well. So when we look at the airport fund, outside of large projects, operationally, it does fine. And when we start adding in these large projects that we talked about when we were talking about CIP, which was the reconstruction of the taxiway and then the construction of the new T hangars, then we start seeing where we have to make larger contributions from the general fund to the airport fund. And so that's what you're seeing, where you see a large dip in your fund balance, your expenditures are higher than your fund balance is going to be. And this even anticipates an increase from your general fund, whereas right now we contribute about $57,000 a year. We projected an $85,000 a year transfer instead, and we still see the declining balance over time. And that was because over the course of the next 3 years, for the one project, we would need to contribute $300,000 as our 10% portion of that KDOT grant, and the other is the FAA grant, and we would need to contribute about $80,000 to that. So we do have to have more discussions about that, and we're not to the general fund yet to talk with you about that, but it's an item we'll be bringing to your attention when we do, because that increased transfer from the general fund is a new expenditure, any type of increase from there. So we want to talk more about that. But also want to be able to show you what the airport fund itself looks like outside of those projects.
The rental income would be from the T hangar rental and the barn rental, or is that just T hangar only?
So we do bring in,
We
get-
bring in about, I think it's about 6,600, if I'm not mistaken, for farm ground lease.
Yes, so we do retain 100% of the farm ground lease,
Yeah.
and it is $99.50, so just under 10,000. And then we keep 10% of the main hangar, 10% of the north hangar, and 85% of the T hangars.
And how many acres is it on the farm? Do you know what's it?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, but about 10,000 a year.
Yeah.
All right.
And then we also receive 10 cents per gallon from the fuel sales. So our revenue totals are about 53,000, 55,000 in revenue, other than your transfer from the general funds. And we really don't have a lot of expenditures out there, other than the contracts with the FBO and some minor operational type costs, but typically they handle most of the operational cost under that agreement. And then we handle some minor expenses. Do you have questions that we can answer about the airport fund today, or do you want to talk more about that transfer from the general fund to support those two projects and what we what that means to the general fund later when we bring that back to you.
On the new T hangers, are we probably about the 85% as well? Was that with our FBO contract? We're at 85% on the new T hangers, or would we be?
With the addition of the T hangers, that would be something that we would have to go back and negotiate in the contract, because those hangers are currently not in this contract. So once they're built, we'd have to amend this contract for that.
Thank
But
you.
I would anticipate somewhere around the same percent.
Do we not get any federal dollars for the airport?
Yes. We do.
FAA.
We do,
Not for operations.
Not
for operations.
It's only for project.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes, no, that's right, yeah.
And that's the 90-10 that, yeah, is optimal.
Yeah, the 300 looks a lot better than 300.
Yeah, but even at that, even at a 90-10 split, it's still a significant cost in this fund that doesn't have a revenue source otherwise to really fund it. So, yeah, I mean, that is something that we have to consider. If I remember, didn't you say that grant, those dollars could go away if we don't use them
Yes.
for that project?
Could go away if we do not expend them. We've got. We can build up to. I think it's $650,000 in discretionary funding. Once we hit that 650,000, if we don't spend that money. Spend the money within the next 12 months, we lose it all. So by the time we hit that full 650. We need to have a project on the books approved by the FAA and be either in the design phase or getting ready to go to the construction.
How soon before we do a new airport master plan?
2028.
It's
It's 10
due
years.
then,
It's 10 years.
it's due then, but
Yep.
we would start working on it prior to that.
We would start working on it in probably 26, maybe 27.
What's the forecast for the revenue structure from all income coming in for building the fund balance so that we know that we're operating essentially in a break even or better so that we can finance these improvements from the operation of the airport itself?
I would say, I don't have that number in front of me. It's a great question. I would say that we're not that far off by bumping. I'd say it'd be somewhere of a commitment between 100,000 annually to maybe 115 annually. That's just a guesstimate, just based on what I see here. So right now, we would be dwindling that fund balance down beginning in 25 and 26 because of those. The $100,000 each of the years, 24, 25, and 26. That's what's dropping our fund balance. Right now, we have a fund balance of 160,000 or 180,000 is what we're anticipating rolling over. But we don't have the 300,000 that's needed for the project or the 380 that's needed for the project over the next 3 years. So we would need to up our transfer from the general fund. So I would say maybe double what it is right now. It's right now we're at 57,000 per year.
So it's subsidized by about 57K.
Currently, yes.
I would think a lot of small airports around like Kansas are the size. The city probably has to subsidize them. Will they ever carry their own weight? Would they ever, or could they? I mean,
It's my second organization to work for that has an airport, and yes, both organizations had to subsidize that airport. Especially when it came to projects. Now, out of an FBO, we don't have that expense. And the same thing in the previous. Employees, but, you know, day to day.
swimming pool, huh?
Service to the community.
Somewhat. But there's people flying, they're buying fuel, they may be coming to town to spend the night in the hotel, buying meals.
Yep.
Doing other shopping. It does produce other revenues in the city.
That's true.
Mhm.
It's,
Can be directly
Thank you.
contributed,
Yes,
yes,
thank you for
yes,
helping me out there. I appreciate it.
Yes.
indirect,
Yes.
yes.
So would it be okay that when we have our general fund conversation, we'll circle back around to this and what that might mean? And if we're not able to contribute what's necessary, we need to have a bigger conversation about these projects and where we'd like to see those land.
Mhm.
Or maybe if there's any flexibility at all in the timing or what we might be able to do, because we might be able to, and I don't know this for certain, but we might be able to temporary note our portion of that project cost, or maybe we can bond finance it over 10 years and make it a smaller payment towards that same project. And so we need to probably do a little more work on that and what that might look like. And so we can make sure that we are going at it the best route as opposed to maybe just directly contributing cash and declining that fund balance so quickly. Okay, any other discussion on the airport right now? No, okay. All right, so we selected one other special fund to take a look at specifically here, and that is the sales tax for Proximity Park. And we just recently have been having conversations about this fund as the sales tax does come to an end in 2026. And so it's good for us to take a look at where this fund lives right now. The sole purpose of that special sales tax right now, which is a 0.5-cent sales tax, which was approved by the voters for the creation of and expenses related to the creation of Proximity Park. And so we have been able to construct all of the public utilities, the streets, all of that is available at Proximity Park. We do have fiber to the park. We are currently using a part of our base grant to provide gas service to the park or to help get gas service to the park, as well as improvements to our water service so that they will have more capacity available at the park. And so this special revenue, the special sales tax that came in really only funds the debt service on the project, as well as the transfers we made for the grant matching for the base grant. And so this really just shows you that the fund balance itself is higher than what we had anticipated it would be, that sales tax has performed better than what we anticipated, and that at the end of our payments on the debt, I'm anticipating we would still have about 3 million, maybe 3.5 million left to be able to contribute to other improvements at the park, should that sales tax not carry forward or, be elected or even taken back to the voters to carry forward. So we would have some dollars available for any future grants or any future improvements, or be able to dedicate that to any anything else that might be needed for Proximity Park as we move ahead with bringing in tenants there.
I guess we're paying off some debt this year because the expenditure is coming down about half of it for next year.
Or was it that we paid our city portion of the base grant?
Yes, so our base grant, we did contribute 1.1 million in 2022. And then this year, I'm estimating that the rest of those projects, so when we talked about the base grant projects, the total for all the projects was about 8 million. And we received 5 million in grant funding. And so part of that 5 million, so we had to come up with our grant match. And then we know that those projects could cost even more than that.
Right.
So I have kind of reserved in this fund 1.3 million, which was based on our original estimates for those projects this year as being additional expenditures that are not necessarily construction expenditures that you're seeing directly come out of here. They're not operational, but they're the rest of the project costs for those base grant projects that weren't covered by the grant funding.
Okay.
So yes, you do see those expenditures come down. The debt service payment, it sits around 850,000 annually. And that pretty much doesn't change. It fluctuates by a couple $100 each year. That's about it.
And that is, that debt service is set to, will it be paid off by 2026 when the special sales tax sunsets?
It will not, I believe it's 2030. I had a note, it's not printed here, but I think it's 2030. It's very close. To when the sales tax ends, but our fund balance will carry forward and be able to make those debt payments. At least that's what my forecast shows now. And then at the end of those debt payments, we should still have about 3.5 million left. Do you have questions about this fund or how it works? It's different than the others. It's one dedicated revenue source and one dedicated expenditure type, or at least for one type of project. Nope. Okay. So what we did here was, because a lot of these, the rest of these funds, if we were to stop under proximity park, and we've talked about community services a little bit, the rest of them, instead of providing you a detail sheet on every one of them, most of these don't have capital projects associated with them. They just have a special revenue and a special expense type. We can go through each one of them individually. In fact, we can do that. But we didn't provide you all the detail to go along with it, because there are things that you've heard of, but we may not know exactly where they're going to land, like the opioid settlement, which we don't know exactly. We haven't determined exactly how we're going to spend those dollars yet. I don't know if there's any additional funds yet to come in. I believe there are above this. So that's another conversation. So right now they're structured as in, we have a beginning balance and we know that there's a fund balance available, but we don't know what the activity is going to be in between. So when we create the budget document, we will just create a reserve in there as an expenditure authority. While we won't have dedicated it to an actual expense line, we'll just give ourselves the authority to be able to spend it should you decide next year what that's going to be used for. And we'll also do a budget amendment in 2023 to give you the same authority should we decide what that programming might look like. Is there anything on here that you specifically want to talk about, or would you like me to run through each of them individually just to tell you what the sources are for both revenue and expenditures?
The wastewater sales tax has a sunset date too, and I know that we
Yes.
didn't get a lot of detail on that, but it does have a sunset date and it's relatively soon.
It is, that does sunset in 2024. I believe it's April of 2024, and it was always intended to sunset at the end of the debt. That sales tax does not fund all of the debt related to those improvements. And so we use a combination of this sales tax, which is a 0.1% sales tax. And we use that with a combination of a transfer from the wastewater utility fund to make those debt payments. So the debt originally related to that plant, that the sales tax went into place for, plus the surcharge that was on the customer bills, those combined make the debt payment for that original plant. And then in addition to, we have some other debt in here. We have a KDHE loan that we refinanced in 2021 that pays off in 2034. So that's an additional expenditure in there as well.
On the golf course, the 35,000, is that the lease payment we get from Great Life, or what?
We don't have anything set in stone. So all that is right now is I took a stab at a revenue and expenditure and just let it sit there so that we have a budget created for the golf course, but we do not know exactly what that's going to look like. So you're aware that we have completed a portion of the transaction for acquisition, but we have not completed the entire acquisition. And we are waiting to see if we will be funded by the Kansas Wildlife and Parks grant. And that is supposed to come out, news on that will come out in June. So that would help with the acquisition. We do know that we have planned or looked into what some of those improvements might be. The first three have been some cart path improvements, potentially some improvements or replacement of the building itself. The irrigation system needs some improvements or replacement. And so we are working on cost estimates for all three of those large items, as well as know that we need to probably do some initial maintenance types items. But the very first thing on our agenda is working with the current company that has the lease on the golf course. That lease does extend for the next 2 years. And so we'll be working with them here shortly to talk about what that will look like. And we'll know after the end of those negotiations what our capabilities are. So the type of lease that is now doesn't allow us to do any type of debt financing or any large improvements to the course. But if we were to move to a different type of management agreement, then we might be able to start improving some pieces of the course as we go. But we do need to decide what that revenue source is going to look like. So there are lots of question marks on this budget. And so for that, we do need to make sure it's a budgeted fund, but we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And for those reasons, we do always have the opportunity to amend. We can always amend that budget once we have a plan, or if there's a new plan for 2024 and the remainder of 2023 before this is put in place, we can just, we'll change our forecast and our budget and have a bigger discussion with you about that.
On opioid settlement, I would anticipate that we probably received the largest payment that we're going to receive. However, there will be additional payments. And it really depends on where they're at on a couple of the major settlements that are coming down. But we have been told from the Kansas Fights Addiction Fund that all the major settlement, the largest settlement amount has been distributed.
Okay.
But there is a tremendous amount of grant dollars that we are now eligible for. And I certainly hope that the city utilizes and applies for some of those. So hopefully we can ask that.
Yeah. So I think the rest of the conversation is on every one of these special funds and any fund that we have, right? You're setting yourself the authority to be able to do what you need to do or want to do with these funds next year. And again, they're not set in stone because they're not property tax generating. They are not creating any new sales tax or any new tax on any one of our residents. They are just simply programming the use of the dollars that are available to us, either through already established special revenue sources or the programs that we might be able to engage in. So if you were to receive grant funding, we wouldn't necessarily need to amend a budget unless we didn't have the authority to match. So there's some different moving parts and pieces to special revenue funds. They are significantly different though than your general fund and those that are mill levy or ad valorem supported.
It's like the risk management is, the expenditures are quite a bit higher than the revenues. And it's just, is that much higher than last year's expenditures?
Yeah, so I don't know that it's much higher, and Michelle is prepared for this conversation.
Let me guess, flood insurance.
Yep. So flood insurance went up 22%.
More on my side.
I know. So overall, our increase for 2023 was 8% overall. That includes all of the different policies that we renew annually. Our renewal is 4/1. With most of the policies. Flood later in April, and then there's some that renew throughout the year.
Then we talked about the deductible and the flood. Are we at like 10,000 or is that? I can't remember.
So they vary.
Each building.
So we have the NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, and on most of the buildings, and then we have excess flood on City Hall, the fire station, and the police station. So the NFIP deductible, which I think we've looked into this in the past that we've got the lowest deductible that I think is available for NFIP. They vary from, let's see, 1,250 down to 1,000. So that policy for all the total of all the NFIP policies, let's see, was about 55,191.
Deductible all of
Total, that's total premiums. The deductible, I didn't add all of those up.
That's fine.
Those are just what they equate to. So that premium is based on the building, the contents, and then the premium, I don't have the deductible listed here for excess, but the total premium is about
81,000.
about 82,000 for this, for the 23. So they estimated for next year, let's see, a range of increase for both of those policies, primary and excess, anywhere between 5 and 15, and we estimated about 5, somewhere in that.
So about 85,000 will pay
Yeah.
for premiums. That's what I just to start the conversation. Sometime we probably have to talk about selling what's getting late.
Yeah.
But if what that would cover if the levee system broke, and we got flooded right here.
Right.
Right. And I think, what are the odds of that happening? Is it worth 85,000 a year to assume that might happen? And if it did happen, God forbid, I would think there'd be some kind of federal program or something to help us do something here. I don't know how many businesses up and downtown Main Street have flood insurance. I'm sure they don't. I mean, I'm guessing it is pretty expensive. But if we got flooded, I don't know the chances of levee break. It's been there since 1962, and then I know we get it inspected. We've heard about levees breaking, but some of those were farm-built levees on their own farms. They did themselves without much engineering. And you hear about those all the time, and those aren't the same as what we have here as levee system. So just to think about spending 85,000, that's about how much of a mill is that? About 3/4 of a mill, I guess. So
So it's about assuming the risk.
Yeah.
And where we are in the flood zone. And I know in 2016, we had an extensive discussion about that. And I don't have those materials with me, but I can pull those out as far as where we're at. 100-year flood or the 500-year, I'd have to go back and look at that.
yeah, just know that I'm not sure it's a good move. I mean, yeah, but we vote to cancel it and then we get flooded. And I hate, that how that happens.
Yeah, we've had some close calls.
Yeah. But as far as we haven't been flooded without a levee break, right? I mean, we take levee break, I would
Right.
think the flood is.
I mean, this obviously, there's other buildings, city buildings that are closer to the levee and that's impacted
Like the police department.
the police department. So and they have excess flood. And if you recall, flood coverage does not cover what's in the basement. Yeah. So that's
I think like on the Carnegie Center, did we get that canceled or was
that's
that?
right. Carnegie's canceled.
Good.
It's not on there.
So
I
we
can
have,
tell you the buildings
yeah,
that
just
are
name the
covered if you
buildings.
like.
Good, just so I know.
So I mentioned fire, police, city hall. We've got all the electric production plant of those buildings. We have all the wastewater treatment plant facilities are covered over there, all their buildings. The water plant is, and every building at the water plant. And then our river lift sewage pump station, we added that because it got flooded right over at Main and 68.
Oh, yeah.
We covered that because it got flooded
Okay,
a number
we've
of
got
years ago.
Insurance coverage.
Yes.
So do you know what essentially what our premium coverage is versus replacement value for the premium paid?
So for replacement value, and I don't have those notes with me, Brian.
Sorry.
This year we bumped up for excess. we wanted to match what was on the policy schedule. And what the building value and contents equated to for the excess. So that in the event that there is a flood for these, for the three buildings that are on excess and NFIP, that those would, if there's a problem, if there's a flood. Yeah. We're gonna be covered.
And then we do fund this by a split between all four of the major funds, general, water, wastewater, and electric. And we have not changed our transfer to this fund for the last 3 years. So to me, that just tells me that it's being managed very well. And so we haven't had anything, really major happen that has caused us to have a big dip in that fund balance or the need to have to contribute far more to it from those funds. So it looks like our fund balance will be pretty steady going forward as long as we don't, see any large claims or changes. And we, Michelle does a really good job of trying to anticipate what those things might be, but there is always the chance of some sort of claim that we're not, that happens that we don't know, but we do try to reserve money in there. Outside of the fund balance, we did make sure we reserve money each year in our budget authority to be able to pay those. We also have some money in there budgeted for any judgments and claims that might come to us that are unexpected.
Well, it seemed like one time we looked at a $10,000 deductible. I thought it was available and it wasn't that much cheaper, I guess, on the premium, if I remember right. I could be wrong.
For which policy?
One of the flood policies, I thought.
I'm not even sure if that, I can look at
I
it.
think you can get, I remember,
Is that available?
I don't think so,
okay,
but I can,
check on, I just
I can
wanted
look, I'm
to
happy
say,
to look at that.
argument, yeah. I think there is something about a $10,000 deduct, and if that's the case, if it's a lot cheaper, that may be worth the risk for them in that case for $10,000 deductible, because I don't think it's gonna happen, but that's. We have a pretty good levy, and the fact they inspect it every few years, I think gives me a little bit more assurance that it's gonna hold. But we've had several times, I don't know how many times we've had to close the floodgates since they were built, I'm guessing about a dozen times, and so it's levies have held and they're good. Anyway, the only flood we did have was outside the levee system, so I can't control that, I guess.
So I guess I'm trying to understand your point of view, Commissioner Skidmore, are you for not having coverage? Are you for having a high deductible and having coverage?
One or the
Tell
other,
me.
I guess let's see what a high deductible might cost, and if it's still excessive.
So is $10,000 considered a high deductible for you, or is $50,000 a high
I don't know if you
deductible
can
or
go back.
100?
I'm just thinking, we had a customer that bank bought some for 10,000 because they were in a flood zone, even though they weren't, they said, and so they bought a policy I thought for $10,000 deductible, so it's quite a bit cheaper.
Mhm.
But they got to have the money up front, of course, if they can get it, but nothing ever happened there. But I'm just wondering about that expense, that if other cities, a major flood comes through, I'm thinking there's organizations through the federal government to help us rebuild if we were to tap that resource. I don't know if all other cities like us outside the levee system have flood insurance expenditure.
You mean, do other cities kind of gamble on
Yes.
the chance that the federal government would offer some kind
There's a
of
disaster relief program.
Disaster
some kind of
relief.
Low interest loan if it was, but it would be way to rebuild and save that $85,000.
Does it, because I know like for residential flood, it only covers essentially like the framing. So like the sheetrock and the contents and everything else, it's your loss.
I don't know if that's-
So if you were to have a flood claim, it's essentially
Where's the cup?
only gonna give you the sticks to put stuff on, and that's it. So what exactly do we get with this coverage? That would be my one question, and then it is, what are you paying for what you're getting, and then start playing the slide of,
Worth it for that, yeah.
because it's shocking how little actually is covered for what they collect. that if we've got something different because of the levies and because of being a municipality. Because I know if we had to replace our generation facility, I'm willing to bet.
Yeah.
They wouldn't help.
So the property policies, that's another. Under that, we have a wind hail deductible that's significant.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only thing that's available now. It's $250,000. I have that information, Brian. What did we get? I just don't have the
I know we've been trying to schedule for us to go through that with the provider, and that's actually gonna be in a few weeks.
It is. Okay, I'll get that information. What other,
Anything else on risk management? No. Any other questions on the special revenue funds in general? There's a couple that you don't have in here. OMA will be presented later in our budget process. The debt service fund will come later. And I believe we had one other, our equipment reserve fund will come later because they pair best with the rest of the budget conversation. So if you have concerns or questions or want to understand better what this looks like, any of that, we're happy to send out the detail to you that establish these. But before we went to that extent, we would have the broader conversation about what those funds look like. But we'll certainly be able to provide all that to you if you wish, and we'll have more time for questions and the rest of our budget conversation.
Any other questions or comments for Director Landis? Director Landis, thank you for this information, and commissioners, feel free if you do have any questions or information that you need from Director Landis, just reach out to her and I'm sure she'll get you what you need.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, that moves on to comments by our city manager.
And I will have this report distributed in a written format, and emailed following the meeting. Just to remind you, from an operational standpoint, that our fire department conducted a joint operations training with the Overland Park Fire Department on the 17th, 18th, and 19th on the river and the Second Street Dam area. And to pass along that our police department's conducting their annual fitness test this week. So they'll be conducting their PT so they can chase down the bad guys and not be too heavily winded with all of their kit on. So we hope you were also able to get out for the fundraiser for the Canine Association. That was cool, and look forward to some more opportunities. Coming down the pipe, Chief had passed along too that they've got some train the trainer, and to remind us that the torch run will be May 30th, arriving here in Ottawa and departing Ottawa on May 31st, headed toward Emporia. And then reminder, Tuesday, May 30th, community band concert in the city park. That'll begin at 7:30. Some other items to note with respect to operations. The Walgreens, as you may have seen, was mowed, but apparently not without incident, as the mowing occurred by headlamp and after 10 p.m. So I know staff will be in contact with Walgreens to try and make sure we're not in a similar type situation again.
I noticed some grass in the street too after they mowed, so I don't know if the person who mowed blowing out or what, but I just noticed some grass in the street, so I can watch for that too.
It's big thing.
Good, good.
The street department, I know that Michael had passed along that they have started the 2023 street maintenance program. So they're cutting and removing concrete and curb and gutter in the 1200 block of South Maple, and also mowing and maintaining the levee system in the right of way both this week and next. They'll be out pothole patching, mowing, and continuing to work on the Maple Street project. And then they had a pre-con with the contractors for the second half on the south side of town for the work that's to occur on Princeton. And he said that we have a late June, early July start. And so to remind folks that we'll have an inconvenience for a few months, but it'll be down to one lane both ways. However, we do anticipate an October 1st or sooner start. So you could just anticipate a 60+ day inconvenience. We'll end up being ahead at the end of the day. Also, passed along that the Forest Park restrooms are now open, as is the pool house. And of course, focus this week is on cemetery operations, as we're hitting that extra hard for the Memorial Day holiday. Utilities, Evergy was replacing some transmission poles in the area of the 2nd Street substation. And so last week, the city carried that load for approximately 7 hours. Also to remind folks that hydrant flushing is underway, and that'll continue now for the next couple of months. And that's important because that helps. You often hear of cities, or you'll read of cities that have had some brown water, and what that is, that's just some mineral deposit buildup that occurs. And so this actually helps reduce that. So that's a good part of why we flush those hydrants. And then the Cottonwood lift station is progressing as planned. And so they've now got all the connections ready to go. And as soon as the pipe gets out to them, they should be ready to begin the connection of that project for the lift station. And then we're looking for, within the next 1 to 2 weeks, the pump housing and such. The connection should begin within the next 1 to 2 weeks, with the pumps and housing arriving soon after, and that should occur here within the next several weeks. So that concludes kind of the operational report for this agenda. And if you have any questions of myself or the city team, we can answer them in greater detail.
Chief, how many times a year do we flush
Twice, and then and then for ISO, we test the number of hydrants around to get a good average of pressure.
Okay. Good, thanks.
And we're not flushing, it's the utilities department that flushes.
No, that's right. I get the wrong word there.
That's all right.
Wrong word.
It all works together.
I guess so, yeah.
They know how to open them slow and fast, and we just, we cause more trouble than we.
Free car wash, right?
Yeah.
All right, that moves on to comments by our city commissioners. Commissioner Graves,
I have no comment.
Commissioner Kaler.
Want the staff to know that I appreciate all that they do to put together the budget. I know that we ask a tremendous amount of questions, but they have to monitor that all year long, and they're the ones that bring the documents to us. So I certainly appreciate that. Also hope that everybody's week started out wonderful as Michael Block, who got a hole-in-one at the PGA, and hope that the rest of your week is just as amazing. So I wish I was that golf pro. He was getting $150 per golf lesson, and now he had a hole-in-one at the PGA, and I'm guessing he gets more than $150 per golf lesson now.
And he made friends with Rory. That's the highlight of it.
Well, no, I mean, the hole-in-one, I think is pretty darn
He
amazing.
went right in the cup, didn't even roll,
I
it went
just-
right in the cup, so that's.
It was beautiful, wasn't it?
Thank you. Commissioner Clayton.
I just want to give a shout out to the OU women's flag football team.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I think we can at this table, the city as a whole can do a better job recognizing OU specifically athletics. This case, they're a 3-time NAIA national champ. It's an emerging sport, so it's not every school in the nation. But I think it's an amazing accomplishment nonetheless that will bring students and potential residents to Ottawa for years to come. So I just want to publicly shout out to that, and as well as staff for all the work. All the questions I get to ask you about all the budget items every year. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Skidmore.
It's all been said already. Can't add to it. It's been good.
I have no comments either. I have a few announcements. Next Monday, our study session has been canceled due to the holiday weekend,
Don't you think we're gonna have a special call meeting?
and city office is closed. We will have a special call meeting Wednesday at 10 a.m. Some of us via the Zoom, or some of us, I don't know, maybe be here. Study session will be our next one will be June 5th here at 4 p.m. City Hall, and then our regular meeting is June 7th, 7 p.m. Anything else to come before the commission this evening? I will adjourn.